Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about my 36-year vegan journey, just some highlights, and share some essential tips with you that I have learned along the way. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that all of you are here because wherever you are on your eating journey, your healthier eating journey, your vegan journey, I hope that I leave you today feeling a little more inspired and affirmed to keep moving forward wherever you are in eating more healthfully because it will change your life. And my own life is a testament to that. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and growing up, I never ever thought that I would become vegan because as a child, I hated vegetables. In fact, the only way that my mother could get me to eat them without a fuss was if she made this vegetable pot pie. This is one of the recipes in the book that I wrote with my mom, Ageless Vegan. It's filled with vegetables smothered in a creamy sauce inside of a flaky pie crust, so what's not to love? But any other time growing up, I was always the last one at the dinner table pushing vegetables around on my plate until my mother would come in the kitchen and put her foot down and make me eat my vegetables. And then we'd go through the same thing the next night, the rest of the week. My mom planted the earliest seeds of healthy eating for us. I'm the youngest of 3 daughters. My mother wanted to raise her children healthy, so while we ate meat and dairy growing up, we also drank skim milk and we ate whole grain cereal, total cereal. We ate whole wheat bread. We cooked from scratch most nights and we ate out maybe once a week. And I was born in 1966, so this is in the late 60s, early 70s. We didn't have a cookie jar or a candy bowl or sodas, except occasionally ginger ale. And I hated it. We had lots of cousins, and when we would go over to their houses, they had junk food, the Captain Crunch, the potato chips, the Cheetos, the Doritos, all of that, the Kool-Aid, the grape sodas, and we got to eat all of that good junk there, but not at home. So I was introduced to vegetarianism, tragically so in my mind, when I was in the 7th grade at Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. My 7th grade teachers decided that all of the food on our annual class camping trip should be vegetarian. I thought this was a horrible injustice, so I wrote a petition against it and tried to get my classmates to sign it. Only a few of them did, and I was promptly overruled. So for our class camping trip, we had granola, fruit juice, and peanut butter and honey sandwiches on whole wheat bread. It was awful. I thought my teachers were crazy, and I never gave vegetarianism a second thought. So fast forward 7 years to 1986, when I was a sophomore at Amherst College, and our Black Student Union brought Dick Gregory to campus. Dick Gregory was a civil rights movement icon and a global human rights activist. He just died a few years ago, and our Black Student Union brought him to campus to talk about the state of Black America, but instead he decided to talk about the plight of Black America, about the health, politics, economics, and culture of what we ate, and why we should become vegetarians. And as many of you here know, at that time, vegetarian was the umbrella term for all different kinds of plant-based eaters. So vegan, vegetarian, lacto-ovo, fruitarian, and all the others. What most of us in college at that time didn't know was that Dick Gregory had become a vegetarian in 1965 because of his involvement in the civil rights movement as a right-hand person to Dr. King. And Dick Gregory extended the practice and philosophy of nonviolence to the treatment of animals. In his 2000 memoir, Callous on My Soul, Gregory wrote, "I had been a participant in all of the major and most of the minor civil rights demonstrations of the early 60s. Under the leadership of Dr. King, I became convinced that nonviolence meant opposition to killing in any form. I felt the commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill,' applied to human beings, not only in their dealings with each other, war, lynching, assassination, murder, and the like, but in their practice of killing animals for food and sport. Animals and humans suffer and die alike. Violence causes the same pain, the same spilling of blood, the same stench of death, the same arrogant, cruel, and brutal taking of life." Dick Gregory's focus on vegetarianism didn't include health at first. He professed that he weighed 300 pounds and smoked, drank, and ate excessively. But all that changed in 1967 when he met renowned naturopathic physician, Dr. Alvenia Fulton. Dr. Fulton had opened the first health food store and vegetarian cafe on the south side of Chicago in 1958, called the Fultonia Health and Fasting Institute. She helped Dick Gregory complete his first fast and become a healthy vegetarian in 1967, which changed his life. And together they wrote Dick Gregory's Natural Diet for Folks Who Eat, Cooking with Mother Nature in 1974, which became an instant classic. It influenced thousands of people to become vegetarians. So by the time Dick Gregory came to my campus, to Amherst College in 1986, he had been a vegetarian for nearly 20 years. During that time, he had been speaking all over the country, encouraging people to go vegetarian. He also had a prosperous health food company called the Bahamian Diet Drink. Anyone? Yes, you're familiar with the Bahamian Diet Drink, and other products. But we, college students at Amherst, did not know that. As part of his speech that day, he traced the path of a hamburger from a cow on a factory farm through the slaughterhouse process to a fast food restaurant to a clogged artery to a heart attack. And it completely rocked my world. The year before, I had gained 25 pounds during my first year in college because I was away from home for the first time and could eat whatever I wanted. I was eating hamburgers and hot dogs almost every day, and I rarely ate vegetables. But I was also going through a paradigm shift at the time because of the courses I was taking on systemic white supremacy, patriarchy, heterosexism, classism, imperialism, and more. Also because of the Black Studies classes I was taking. I took the relaxer out of my hair. I was experiencing all of this at that time, so I was open to questioning the way society dictated I should eat as well. After Dick Gregory's lecture, I immediately stopped eating meat, but that only lasted for about a week. I thought, who does this? Dick Gregory is crazy, but I couldn't get what he said out of my mind. I remember calling my mother and my sister Maria, who was a senior at Tufts at the time, and telling them about the lecture and that I thought I should become vegetarian. A few months later, I went home to DC for the summer, and I got all the books that I could get out of the library, the Martin Luther King Library and the Library of Congress. This was 1986, years before we had the internet, so you had to physically go to the library to do research. My mother and Maria read the books too, and by the end of the summer, I decided to go vegetarian. But it wasn't quite that easy. After that summer, I took my junior year away. I went to Nairobi, Kenya the first semester, and I went to Howard University the second semester. While I was arriving in Kenya as a brand new vegetarian, the head of our program said that they would not make separate vegetarian food for me when they had 29 other students to cook for. So I didn't know where to shop or how to cook my own food in Nairobi. So I had to eat the meat and dairy-based foods that the program prepared. But there were two incidents involving animals that I want to share with you that made me know that I would become vegetarian again when I got back home. The first happened when we traveled with Samburus for 2 weeks in Masai Mara. So I hope you all know that big smile, the person in the big smile with the white V-neck t-shirt is me in the middle. Samburus are semi-nomadic camel and goat herders, and we lived and traveled with them for 2 weeks, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. As part of that 2 weeks, we climbed up to a mountain cave and brought 2 goats with us. The night before that, I had seen a goat being born at the home of the Samburu family that we were staying with. I took a picture. I had never seen a human or non-human animal give birth before, so it had a profound effect on me. So the next day, we climbed up to the mountain cave and stayed for 2 nights. And we brought 2 live goats with us. The first night, the Samburu men prepared to cook the first goat. They slit its throat and let the blood pour from its neck into a bowl. They drank some of the blood and invited us as their guests to do the same. Some of the students drank the blood and made Dracula faces. When it was my turn, I knelt down to drink it. Then I stopped in midair and decided not to drink it. And I decided that I wasn't going to eat the goat meat either. But as they prepared the goat as goat stew, it was smelling really good to me, and I decided to eat it, but I felt guilty eating in front of the second goat that was tethered to a tree near me, and I wondered if it knew what had happened to its companion. The second incident happened on the last night of our safari. As part of the safari, we spent several days on a lorry truck out on the Mara observing animals and learning about them. There were gazelles, giraffes, lions, elephants, zebras, and more. We were on the animals' turf in their world, learning about them, and it was fascinating to me. So the last night on safari, we went to a restaurant called The Carnivore. And at that time in 1986, they served animals that people had killed on safari in the restaurant. So I remember that we were all seated at a long wooden table with a long plate in the middle of it. And 4 waiters came out carrying a huge antelope-looking animal that had been roasted whole over a pit. And they placed it down on a plate in the middle of the table in front of us, and there it was with its head and eyes and tail, and the waiters began carving it up in front of us to eat. And that was so repulsive to me that I didn't eat it. And I know that's because I had seen many of these animals living and thriving in their own domain just days before. So it was at that moment that I resolved that I was going to be vegetarian for sure when I returned home. Now, I don't have a memory after that dinner at the carnivore of eating meat again. Sometimes I say that's the last time I ate meat. I really can't remember. But that was so repulsive I didn't eat it that night, and I did resolve not to eat it not to eat meat again when I returned home. So the next semester I went to Howard University. I was living at home with my mom in DC, walking back and forth to campus, and I started noticing that I was walking past vegetarian places right near Howard. Like this building, the House of Knowledge, which held brown rice, vegan cafe and health food store, a vegetarian bakery, and pyramid bookstore. In fact, there were a total of 12 Black-owned vegan restaurants and health food stores throughout Washington, D.C., and they were the only 100% vegan establishments in D.C. in the nation's capital, and they were all Black-owned in primarily low-income communities. There were also vegan food trucks at Howard University called Body Ecology and other places around the city, which had started in the 1970s. This vegan community included longtime activists from the civil rights and Black liberation movements, natural health entrepreneurs, raw foodists, Black Hebrew Israelites, the Alcer Asset Society, Muslims, college students, artists, and many more. And their influence was felt throughout the city at cultural festivals, Kwanzaa celebrations, and social justice rallies where vegan food was the main fare. I immersed myself in this community, soaking up their knowledge. My mom and I went to lectures, took cooking classes, and learned where to shop, how to make the food affordable, the politics of food, and much more. Again, this is years before we have the internet, so this community was bringing folks from all over the country to come and speak at Howard and these vegan cafes and other places for us to learn from. So by the time I returned to Amherst for my senior year, I was a confident and committed vegetarian. However, I was still eating cheese, so I wasn't vegan yet. Amherst did not have daily vegan options in the cafeterias back then in 1987, so I used to catch the bus each week and buy groceries at the Bread and Circus in town. There was no Whole Foods on the East Coast at that time. I cooked my meals in the basement of the Charles Drew house where I lived, and I carried my plate of food over to the dining hall every day, twice a day for lunch and dinner to eat with my friends. But in Massachusetts, it gets very cold in the winter, and on many days, instead of carrying my plate of food over to the dining hall, I would eat alone in the living room in front of the TV. But despite this, I stuck to my vegetarian eating. It had already become a part of my lifestyle. But that year, I was also determined to let go of cheese. And that decision was purely mind over matter because I still loved the taste and smell of cheese. But I also knew that cheese is the biggest source of saturated fat in the American diet. I had to decide that my health was more important than the momentary pleasure of a piece of cheese in my mouth. The way I did it was by continuously reading about how unhealthy cheese is and the animal cruelty involved in how it's produced. So this was going on in the background while I was still eating cheese. And eventually, I just lost the desire to eat it. I don't remember the day or having some big last cheese-laden pizza or other meal. I just let it go sometime during my senior year in college and became a vegan. After I graduated, I moved back to DC. And in my first few years of being vegan, I noticed some personal health changes in myself. Those extra 25 pounds went away without much extra effort on my part. The pimples on my face cleared up, and that was largely the result of doing my first supervised cleanse for 14 days. My menses became lighter. I didn't have cramps very often as well. Professionally, I had a demanding career as a museum director, working 50 to 60 hours a week, but I spent my evenings and weekends doing vegan cooking, demos and talks at churches, schools, community organizations, and health fairs throughout the Washington, D.C. area with my sister Maria. And in 1997, at the urging of a friend who was an early adopter of the internet, we started one of the first vegan websites ever, which was also the first vegan website by and for African Americans. We called it, that's us, we called it blackvegetarians.org, and this is how it looked when we started it in 1997. And this is how it looked when we upgraded it in 2001. We also co-founded an animal rights organization for people of color with two friends of ours during that time. We called it JASS, which stood for Justice for All Species. As part of that work, we interviewed Black animal rights activists, wrote articles about the conflation of the enslavement of African Americans and the oppression of animals. We leafleted at circuses and zoos and protests, and we always rooted our work in the history and present of African American experiences. I loved doing this vegan advocacy work so much that I eventually decided to change professions. I left the museum job around my 30th birthday. I did not have another job lined up. I had bought a house a few years earlier, so it was kind of risky, but I stepped out on faith. So being vegan for about 10 years at this point had become a window for me, a doorway into other healthy living practices. I was already taking yoga classes and began training to become a yoga teacher. I started teaching yoga classes at the YWCA and a gym in the area. My sister was teaching Pilates at that time. I also had been volunteering with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine for a few years. How many folks are familiar with PCRM now, I think called the Physicians Committee, Neil Barnard? I soon started working there as a public policy liaison. I helped create the strategy for their lawsuit against the USDA charging food industry bias in the dietary guidelines. And it was there at the Physicians Committee that I read an article on the bulletin board written by Marion Nessel, who was the director of the New York University Graduate Program in Nutrition and Food Studies and Public Health Nutrition. So I decided to apply to that program. I got accepted with a full academic fellowship, and I started in the fall of 2001. I actually arrived in New York a week before 9/11 happened. To earn extra money beyond the fellowship, I taught yoga classes at NYU, and I worked as an office manager at my cousin's architecture practice, which was near Ground Zero. It was all quite surreal. I remember even a month later coming up out of the subway, and you could still feel the soot coming down into your throat. NYU's graduate school did not teach classes on plant-based nutrition at that time. When I questioned this, they said they were required to teach a meat and dairy-based nutrition curriculum to keep their accreditation. But I was able to create my own focus on plant-based nutrition, but there were issues. In fact, my nutrition and marketing class was taught by one of the creators of the Got Milk campaign, and that was used as a case study for the course. In another class, when they did mention vegetarianism, they talked about it as a deficient diet. So of course, I questioned the professor about that. We went back and forth in the class a little bit, and she asked me to bring in documentation to show that vegetarianism was a healthy diet. Well, I had just worked at the Physicians Committee, so I had lots of recent evidence at my fingertips. So I brought in a whole file folder of documentation the next week. I don't remember the actual discussion that day, but I do remember the professor waiting until nearly the end of the class to call on me. Soon after that, I got called in for a meeting by my advisor. She told me that my professor said I was challenging her authority and being disruptive in class. So my advisor asked me, do you want to be right or do you want to graduate? And she said, if you tell your patients to go vegetarian, you might lose them as clients. To which I said, don't we have a moral obligation to tell them the truth? So that's what I was dealing with in graduate school in the early 2000s. NYU's graduate program does teach plant-based nutrition now, but sadly, most public health schools and medical schools still teach no or very little plant-based nutrition. So since graduating in 2003, I've been working as a public health nutritionist throughout the past 20 years, teaching people how and why to go whole food vegan and using a variety of ways to do this work. In 2004, I directed the Vegetarian Society of DC Eat Smart program, which was the first federally funded community-based vegan nutrition program in the country. We taught primarily Black folks with low incomes how and why to go vegan. They were free 12-week programs, and I taught in 4 different locations across the city. They included cooking classes, meal plans and recipes, guest lectures, nutrition classes, grocery store tours, fitness classes, and more. And it was all free. And we taught a specific class for senior citizens, and my mother was my classroom assistant. In that first year, we surpassed all of our goals, and people experienced remarkable health benefits, and we had a waiting list of 200 people. And I directed that program during 2004 through 2009. But being the overworker that I was at that time, I also developed a plant-based nutrition curriculum for the Black Women's Health Imperative and for the DC public school system as an adjunct professor at the University of the District of Columbia. I'm a writer at heart, and in 2010, I wrote my first book, By Any Means Necessary. I look so young there. By Any Means Necessary, a revolutionary guide for Black women who want to eat great, get healthy, lose weight, and look fat. It was the first vegan diet book for Black women, and I'm proud to say that it's helped thousands of people go vegan during the last decade. In fact, the New York Times cited it as one of the drivers of the popular rise of veganism among African Americans in the last decade. According to a 2016 Pew Research Center study, African Americans are the fastest growing vegan and vegetarian demographic in the country, at 8% as compared to 3% of Americans overall. And it's estimated that the majority are women, so Black women are leading the way. This is consistent, yes, that can be applauded too. This is consistent with research that the Vegetarian Resource Group has been doing for decades, so this is actually nothing new. In 2020, I celebrated the 10-year anniversary of My Any Greens Necessary, and to mark the occasion, I wanted to do something big and bold and necessary, so I created the 10,000 Black Vegan Women campaign to help 10,000 Black women go vegan together online for 21 days in October of 2020. And yes, this was during the pandemic. We ended up having more than 12,000 women sign up for the program, and many of them experienced life-changing health benefits, lowered blood pressure and cholesterol, weight loss, more energy, mental clarity, eating more vegetables, and gaining more confidence in cooking and going vegan. And based on that success, I decided to expand the program into a larger nonprofit public health initiative, the 10 Million Black Vegan Women Movement, with the mission of changing our health paradigm now and for generations to come. And that's the work that I'm engaged in now. While Black women are the current face of veganism in the United States, the majority of us are experiencing among the worst health outcomes in the country. The root cause is systemic white supremacy and capitalism. We have a long history of eating plant-centered foods. African American foodways have their historical roots in the fiber-rich diets of our African ancestors. And this fiber-rich culinary heritage survived 400 years of our sojourn here in the United States through enslavement, Jim Crow, the Great Migration, and the civil rights and Black liberation movements. Through the dietary upheavals of these past 4 centuries, African Americans have maintained an affinity for growing, purchasing, and eating fiber-rich foods. In fact, dietary surveys from 1965 show that African Americans in cities were twice as likely to meet the dietary recommendations for fruits, vegetables, and fiber than the overall U.S. population. However, that began to systematically change in the 1970s. In Supersizing Urban America by Chen Zhu, and in the Pulitzer Prize-winning book franchise, The Golden Arches in Black America by Marcia Chatelain, both authors talk about fast food restaurants targeting African-American neighborhoods with the help of federal subsidies, following the rebellions after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. So African-American neighborhoods in major cities went from having no fast food chains to being inundated, targeted with them. Federally subsidized fast food companies targeted African-American communities with cheap, low-fiber, low-nutrition, high-calorie food and relentless advertising. As a result of this systematic targeting, African Americans went from being the highest consumers of fiber-rich foods in the mid-1960s to being the lowest consumers of these foods by 1996. And that targeting continues today, along with systematic decreased access to healthy foods. One of the results has been higher rates of chronic diseases, disability, and premature death. And yet, next to this wide ocean of systematic targeting, there has been a mighty river of African-American leaders and innovators in the plant-based movement. This includes vegetarian Black Seventh-day Adventists at Oakwood University in Alabama from the 1890s, along with the other activists and organizations I mentioned earlier. And some I highlight in the first free African-American vegan starter guide I created in partnership with Farm Sanctuary in 2016. And I saw that there are actually copies of this free guide on the table. So thank you for having that. People have ordered more than 400,000 free printed copies of this guide, and there have been countless free downloads, which I'm very gratified about, and I plan to create an updated guide next year. I consider my work to be part of this long line of activists, and I'm honored to be influencing the next generation. My experience teaching veganism over these past few decades has been that when you talk with people about the economic, political, historical, cultural, and social framework around eating healthier, they get it. And most folks want to act right away to do something differently to change the way they eat. After all, I would venture to say that most people don't want to be unhealthy, and most people don't want their loved ones to be unhealthy either. They just have different information or resources or circumstances, and they have been targeted to eat unhealthy. And my goal has always been for us to learn, share, and grow together. So that's some of my vegan journey during the past 36 years. And now I want to share some tips that I hope can help you on your healthy eating journey. Over the years, I've noticed a few common things that can trip people up as they transition to veganism. So here they are, along with how to avoid them. Not knowing your why. This is all about getting clear about why you want to go vegan. Is it for your health, the animals, the environment, social justice, spirituality, faith, or other reasons? Whatever the reason is, be sure you're passionate about it. Be sure you understand it and believe it. This foundation is crucial because as you begin to transition, there will be inevitable obstacles along the way. The meat and dairy you used to eat will probably still look and smell good to you, especially during the first few weeks or months of your transition. And eating differently than many of your family and friends may be challenging for you in the beginning. So being grounded and confident in why you're going vegan will ultimately help you overcome these challenges. Next, feeling pain instead of joy. When people think about going vegan, they often focus on how hard they think it will be. They focus on the foods they'll be giving up instead of all the new foods they will be adding on to their plates. They worry about being different than others instead of the beauty of their own personal transformation. In other words, they fixate on deprivation instead of abundance. To avoid this mistake, shift your mindset. My mantra is liberate your mind and your mouth will follow. Embrace the adventure of this new path you're taking and keep an open mind and heart. Next, comparing instead of inspiring. Do you know how long it's going to take you to go vegan? The answer is however long it takes you. I tell people all the time that it's not a race or a competition. Your vegan journey is your own. It's great to read the vegan transition stories of other people for inspiration, but there's a big difference between inspiration and comparison or competition. Inspiration can make you feel excited and motivated that you can do it too. Comparison or competition can make you feel deflated and doubtful that you can do it. It's not necessary to feel bad to grow. So be kind and gracious with yourself and seek encouragement and support from folks that will lift you up. And next, giving up when you slip up. This one is key. When you're transitioning to vegan foods, it can be common to take one step forward and two steps backward. So you might be doing great one day or by eating all vegan food, then the next day or two, you might slip up by eating meat and dairy. Understand that this is usually part of the transition process, so don't beat yourself up and don't give up. Just start again the next day. And at the same time, continue to read vegan books and blogs, watch vegan cooking videos and documentaries, follow your favorite vegan influencers, get support from others so that even on those days when you slip up, know that all the things you're doing are still working together in the background to help you mentally and physically transition. Keep your eyes on the prize and know that you are in the process of going vegan and you will do it. And I'll also add in terms of foods, I encourage folks to start by veganizing the familiar foods they already love to eat. So if it's a stir-fried dish, use chickpeas, black beans, cashews, or tofu instead of meat, and keep the colorful veggies and dried herbs and spices because they're already vegan. I like to say that a dead bird doesn't taste good. It's the seasoning that you put on it that somehow you think makes it taste good, but it's all about the seasonings, the spices, and if you use oil and flour, the oil and flour as well. And for folks who are already vegan or vegetarian, there's probably one thing you know you can do to up your game and take your health to the next level. If you're a vegetarian, it may be letting go of dairy products. If you're a vegan, it may be eating a more balanced diet that includes more dark leafy vegetables, greens, and whole grains. Whatever it is for you, you can get started right away. And finally, enjoy the journey. The last step is to enjoy your journey to becoming a vegan with all of its joys and challenges. Life is going to life after all, and you or your loved ones may experience unexpected health challenges even as a vegan. As I heard someone put it succinctly recently, low risk ain't no risk. And even with that, eating whole food vegan is the healthiest way we know to eat and can help reduce our risk for preventable chronic diseases, along with exercising, resting, maintaining a healthy weight, being in community with others, and not smoking by up to 80% or more. And of these key lifestyle practices, nourishing your body with plant-based nutrition is the most important. The longer you eat healthier plant-based foods, the more you'll want to eat them. And as time passes, you'll find that being vegan gets easier and easier to the point that it becomes your new normal. It becomes effortless and second nature. And ultimately, you'll come to know that being vegan is a path, not a destination. It's part of the foundation of a healthy life that can allow you to live your life with greater ease and joy. And that's what I want for all of you.